Hey folks, and welcome back to The Stitch Up. We've got a very special bonus episode for you today. We're going to be discussing the very recently released Matt Reeves' The Batman. So, The Batman, here we are, 2022, it finally come out. Amazing piece of work. I really dig it. I'm not going to get too deep into it. This isn't going to be a super long episode or something. Just a little taste, a little soupçon, if you will, of what I think this film has been able to achieve. I'm not going to be critiquing it so much. I'm kind of done with that a little bit. I was going to make this a separate post, but it kind of works in what we're talking about here. After I did the Venom 2 episode, I found myself frustrated by the fact that I was being overly critical. And that's not what The Stitch Up is about. It's about looking at something, with positivity and gratitude and being open to whatever happens to come out of a cinematic art, whether it works or it doesn't. Appreciating the craft and appreciating the outcome, whether you personally like it or you don't. I mean, some movies are just trash, and that's going to happen. But there's always something to be found there. You know, there's something to be appreciated, because it's such a beautiful art form, filmmaking and cinema as a whole, no matter what you're doing. And it's something I've been guilty of as well, absolutely. It's favourite signifying. It is identifying or assimilating into your personality the things that you like, the things that you enjoy. And that's not necessarily a bad thing, but I just felt like that's not what I want to be doing. That's not what I want to be putting out there. This film is going to galvanize a lot of people. You always have that happen when you've got big IP, especially the kind of IP that people attach their personalities to. Star Wars, Marvel, DC. There's always going to be a lot of contention. There's always going to be a lot of loud voices, talking about what most of the time they don't like. And that's fine. If you want to be a critic in that sense, more power to you. I just don't want to do that personally. What I'm going to do is talk about what I really dug about this film. And it was a lot of it, to be perfectly honest. But I just want to talk about some specific stuff, not about the whole story. There's a bunch of small things that make this film really great as an entirety, as a whole. Number one is absolutely the cinematography by Greg Fraser. Now, Greg Fraser is a Melbourne-born cinematographer. Cinematographer on Dune, Mando, Rogue One. The guy's credits are fantastic. He's a supremely talented lensman. This film speaks to that so much. And I understand absolutely that Matt Reeves would have had an awful lot of input into how he would shoot this movie and how he wanted it to look. It's very specific to what they are trying to do. They use anamorphic lenses where the image is shot stretched this way and then flattened. So you get beautiful, what they call bokeh, which is a lot of you probably know this, but the plumes of light in the soft focus areas of the frame tend to be circular. And it's, great for stuff like this, where it's a lot of night work and cars and street lamps and things like that in soft focus with the rain coming down. It's just, but when shooting anamorphically, that bokeh goes from being circular to oval shaped. And also you get a lot more drop off on either side of the frame. So either side of the frame here would be soft focus, even if something was in the distance. And that creates a beautiful focused image, leads your eye directly where the director and the cinematographer want your eye to go. So much of the frame is soft, but still you catch everything. You're not missing details because there is parts of it that you can't see. So much so that in some of the scenes, action takes place in soft focus. For instance, the scene where, spoilers by the way, just to put it out there, before we get into specific parts of the film. The scene where Riddler kidnaps the DA in his car, and you see him get hit in the head, and then it goes through a reverse shot, and he has his hands on a steering wheel. His hands come off the steering wheel, and the thing that stays in focus is the steering wheel. He and the Riddler are out of focus as Riddler straps on the bomb neck, and you see the lights blinking. Beautiful use of composition and the frame that you can achieve in an anamorphic format to relay story that's also, you don't know what that is. Oh, what's the blinking lights? He's got something around his neck. You don't know that it's a bomb. You don't see genre films in particular, and this genre too, of the more modern cinematic versions of superhero films, comic book films. And there's kind of a bitter taste in people's mouth about that these days because they're so present and prevalent within our culture, and it seems to be the thing that's only making any money. But regardless of that, all of those films, including the previous Batman incarnations, have been kind of glossy. They've definitely got style, more so than the bigger stuff, the Marvel Cinematic Universe, kind of have a sheen to them. And a format, like there's kind of a house style as directing. There's not a lot of room there for artistic interpretation of these characters because they're part of a huge world. This Batman film lives by itself and therefore affords the filmmakers the opportunity to make it very, very visually unique. And they've done this by the use of long lenses, again, the anamorphic lenses, shooting in very low light, and also the texture. So we're talking about rain, we're talking about shadows, the kind of things that people describe as dark and gritty, which this film's getting touted as a lot. When you say dark and gritty, what you actually mean is tone and texture. So subject matter can be dark and gritty. That's not really the words either. I guess that's more, is it serious? Dark and gritty does mean tone and texture. Texture being the rain, like we said. It can also mean the lens choice, so your soft areas versus your harsh areas. The cutting of sharp shadows. There is a flatness to this as well. It's a very soft, matte kind of palette, not just in terms of the color, but just in terms of the lack of sheen. It does feel dirty, there is, and not dirty in the sexy way, but it does feel like that too in sometimes. Sometimes very sexy. Mostly when Robert Pattinson's on screen. That guy's outrageously good looking. When you're looking at things that dirty up the frame, foreground and background versus what's actually in focus or what should be the focus of the shot, you've got a lot going on either side. I think the dark and gritty idea also stems from the idea of Batman, that he's a nocturnal based superhero and punches dudes in their faces until they submit. Specifically in this one, very angry young man at this point. Bruce Wayne is almost non-existent. Just the period of time that you get Batman on screen. If you look at the other Batman films, and this isn't a critique, it's just a fact, the other Batman films, if you track the screen time that they have, it diminishes as the film goes on. I think The Dark Knight Rises, he's on screen for about 18 minutes in the costume. That film goes for 2.5 hours. And it's fine. I like that film a lot. It works. But in this film, he is Batman through and through. And you're getting very much more the noir sense of the character that people have always talked about. And artists like, and writers like Frank Miller have lent into. The grim and dark idea of it is that noir feeling. The mystery, the murder mystery, and the detective story. I mean, he is the world's greatest detective, and we haven't really seen him do much in the way of detecting in this instance, working directly with the police, working directly with Jim Gordon, breaking down the clues. And the Riddler is, he's all about the clues. He's literally leaving a breadcrumb trail for them. So I think that's what people probably mean when they say dark and gritty. They mean the way that it looks and feels, but also how it is tonally, as in what is the storytelling. I just feel like dark and gritty is a really overused term. And when you're talking about tone, you can't mistake the score. I mean, those simple keys and the composer, whose name escapes me right now, I'll put the name up. Fantastic composer. He's written some really great scores, actually. Done a lot of work for Marvel. Funnily enough, he just did No Way Home. So, he's working in the genre. He wrote one of the best Marvel scores, which is the Doctor Strange score. This one in particular does the thing that really good scores do, and they become iconic. Think about how hard it is to become iconic in this day and age, music-wise or score-wise, to create a theme that endures. Everyone's done the test. Hum the Star Wars theme right now. I'm not going to do it because you're doing it. Indiana Jones. You're doing it, aren't you? You can see the boulder coming at him right now. That one. Superman. The original Superman, 79. The Batman theme, the original Batman theme, which sounds like this. Right? Danny Elfman. Amazing. Incredible score. You remember those because they're iconic and because there's so little going on. It's just these themes. They're not super stacked, the way that a big bombastic Hans Zimmer score can be. Even the Jaws. It's like 2 chords or something like that. I'm not a pianist, and that's not what they do. That's a piano. It should be on the cello, but you know what I'm saying. Memorable because there's a simplicity to it. This dun, 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 and then the variations of that, the ratcheting of that up, the speeding of it up, the slowing of it down, the making it almost flat, and having it kind of fit in with the use of the Nirvana song "Come As You Are." Like, I think it might even be the same. It might be the same key, might be the same chord progression. Fucking sounds alike is my point. I don't know what came first. Maybe the trailer with that in it. That is going to stick in people's heads, especially if they get more movies. If they do 2 more of these, at least, that theme is going to endure. And I'm absolutely positive of that because I cannot get it out of my head. To be fair, I've been listening to that album like on repeat while working out. It's a really good workout album because you get all Batman and then you lift the things and the heavy stuff and you do I don't jog, but boxing maybe. But you do, it's very motivating is my point. It's such a beautiful score and it's, so well constructed and fits in beautifully with the next part, which I really enjoy. Again, we're talking technically. The sound design for this film, there's no reason it should be this good. There really isn't. There is nothing that says a Batman movie should be this deft a hand in terms of cinematography, its score, its sound design, all the performances as well. They're going for something else. In fact, this is probably the only Batman film you'll ever see that has an Oscar over the top of it and a question mark. And if you don't think so, go back and watch Colin Farrell's performance again. I know a lot of the heavy lifting is being done by the makeup, but fuck me. That guy is transformed in this film. And it's not just about the makeup. He has become that character. And I can't wait to see what else they do with it. But that's not what I was talking about. The sound design, the chase sequence with the Penguin, the Batmobile, the way the Batmobile sounds. Pulling out of sound, like the removal of sound is just as important as having it. Ask any sound engineer. The absence of sound can be critical. And the smallest of things, Gotham sounds like Gotham would. It has a dampness and a dankness that it's heavy. The sound is heavy. It's the rain. It's the sloshing of feet. It's Batman's really heavy boots on everything, which is baller. It's his costume that looks like, I guess it's probably not leather, but it kind of looks a bit leatherish. It's got sort of stitching and stuff. But when he moves, it crinkles and it sort of moves the way that, like you're getting off a vinyl couch, but cooler and throwing batarangs. He doesn't have any batarangs in this. Oh no, he's got the big one in here that he uses to slice stuff, but he does have that cool thing, grappling hook. But anyway, yeah, something like that even, like the sound of the grappling hook. Super important and something that you only notice after seeing it 3 times, which I have. And I'm not saying I'm not going to see it again either. So you can shut your fucking mouth. Don't tell your audience to shut its fucking mouth. I love this. Talking about the suit, I really dig it. I didn't at first. I didn't think it was looked right. It was too... it leans really heavily on the video games as well. I mean, the whole thing is very Arkham in that series of games. But also definitely Year One, the Batman Year One comic, there's stuff pulled directly from it. For instance, the voiceover, the diary entries, that is straight out of Year One. And I love it too because it's the first Batman movie they've done that with. I mean, that's what Batman, if you read comics, that's what Batman is. You hear him in your head. He seldom doesn't have that in the book. As far as the costume concerned, taking very much from the games, it's also got this wicked collar where the cape sort of comes down and tucks into the chest plates. Looks really cool, hangs really, really well, and the huge, big, heavy boots. And that bulletproof armor that's totally practical because it's, bulletproof. He's got pouches on his legs. Utility belt is literally that. It's not there fashionably yellow or whatever. It's functional. He's got everything he needs. And then you see him use it in a way that you don't in the other pictures. Or not in a way that seems realistic, like all of a sudden he pulls out these bombs. Where were they? Behind your cape. In this one, he's got actual pouches. And it kind of reminds me a little bit of the cowl in particular and the cape and that, of the Gotham by Gaslight, Elseworlds Tale, where a Batman that is in Victorian London is hunting Jack the Ripper. And it's pretty cool. And I always like the costume from that, so they got a lot. Going to have to take a second to talk about Jeffrey Wright. Such a phenomenal actor. I don't know how to talk about him and not just gush. Such an amazing range. And he gives Gordon a real frustrated nature and an on-the-edge nature that you don't get in those other pictures. And again, I'm not judging those other pictures. I'm not putting one against the other and saying this is better than this one. That's not the case. It's just a different interpretation. And I enjoy this interpretation because there's an unhingedness to Gordon. in the same way that there is an unhingedness to Batman. He feels very on the edge. Everybody's against him. And Batman is literally the only person that he can trust. He says it at one point. Everybody else is totally corruptible. Gordon alone that isn't just sympathetic, he's also someone that you want to just beat necks as well, Just get in there and mix it up. And I haven't felt that sort of physical presence in Gordon up until this point. And just speaking as well of the parallels between him and Batman, the parallels between the Riddler and Batman are really interesting as well. And that comes to a head when they finally meet, in the jail, and Riddler kind of lets Batman in on thinking that he was part of the plan, that he was part of his team, and then Batman tears him down. But just previous to that, Batman is the Batman is in Riddler's hideout, and he goes through the fucking, the John Doe 7 books, the ledgers, which are just filled with insane scribblings and diary entries, and Batman's like, I fucking do this. Oh shit. I also am a graphomaniac, person who writes compulsively. It's so interesting to see this kind of psychopathy in a Batman, where he is completely unhinged. Bruce Wayne doesn't exist, like I said. There is no Bruce Wayne in this world. He is Batman all the time. He hasn't developed the playboy, high society, always going out with debutantes and all that kind of shit. Well, that Bruce Wayne isn't there. I mean, he's almost a recluse at this point. Really, really interesting to see between Gordon, him, and the Riddler, just what this city is doing to them. Zoe Kravitz is a fantastic Catwoman. I really dig her. I think she's got great agency and great power. There's a whole story there that you don't need Batman for. The moment she sees Batman, her introduction is it's fantastic. Like, there's Selena and Bruce have this thing, and have throughout the entirety of the Batman comics and a couple of the movies. They are, as Angelica Jade Bastien says, meant to be together. Even more so in this because it's instantaneous. As soon as she sees Batman, she looks up, she stops, she recognizes who it is, and it's not fear, it's not judgment, it is wonder, wanting to pry open that mystery and see who's under the mask. I love it. I love their story. And there's a lot of stuff that happens with her off screen. She does a lot of shit on her own. She doesn't give a fuck what Batman thinks. He does help guide her in a safer direction, a direction that helps her, achieve what her goals are without the loss of life. But in the end, she's kind of the same. She's like, hey, do you want to go and rip off some fucking Fortune 500 guys? We'll have a blast. And he's like, no, Gotham needs me. And that's always going to be the issue for them, is that Gotham is always going to win over whatever he wants in his heart. But yeah, I think she's a great actress and supremely talented, and puts in a fantastic portrayal of this character in a way that we haven't seen up until this point. Getting into your villains, Paul Dano's great as the Riddler. That kind of Zodiac visage, the Zodiac killer visage is really good. He also plays insane without playing cute. He's in no way funny, seriously threatening and terrifying. And his plan is even more so. I'll get to more of that in a minute. Colin Farrell is the Penguin. My God, if this guy doesn't get an Oscar nod, it's just, not that really means anything anyway, but just some recognition for the fact that he is, and the people who did the makeup too, they should get dual Oscars for those two things, because it really is a remarkable performance. He reminded me of a young Robert De Niro, and a little bit of Al Pacino too, and he obviously doing that, he's doing almost a New York accent. He just embodies it, like the anger and the brutishness, but also the fear that comes from the job that he does, where at any minute the guy you work for can turn. And that's it. You're in Gotham Harbour with concrete shoes. He was the highlight for me, I think. He was definitely the MVP. Andy Serkis, fantastic as Alfred. The Alfred that we know from the Earth 1 comics. A bit more of, and the Gotham show too, I guess. Ex-SAS, the hard as nails kind of guy. Talks about how he taught Bruce how to fight. Pretty cool. We hadn't seen that version of him. And lastly, you've got to talk about R-Pats. Now, he probably shouldn't call him that. It's disrespectful. Robert Pattinson. I, like many of you, was super skeptical. Absolutely I was. What are you talking about? The fucking twinkly vampire dude. I made a joke about it in one of the episodes, one of the Drop Stitch episodes about those Twilight movies, and I called him a twinkly vampire person. It's a weird choice. The same thing that happened with Ben Affleck. Everybody lost their fucking shit because Ben Affleck's body of work didn't present as a Batman, even though he is probably one of the best actors of his generation. Robert Pattinson absolutely is one of the best actors of his generation, because I was of a better mindset when he was announced, and I thought, you know what, I'm going to give this a whirl. What have you got for me, Robert? I'd only seen him in those films. I don't really like those films, but, you know, that's okay. And he's fine in them. He's kind of asleep, but then they all are, because they're vampires. They're tired people, you know. They're up all day and all night too. Is that the one that would, you know what, I'm getting detracted from the point. That was the one where they can walk around in the daylight. They just twinkle. That's strange. Anyway, so I thought to myself, okay, well, let's have a look. Let's give him a chance. So I started watching his other films. Come to find that he makes fascinating choices in terms of his characters, in terms of the things, the films that he decides to do. Obviously, he made his money on Twilight and Harry Potter or whatever else it was that he's done. Now he can just do whatever he wants. And he's done a lot of indie stuff. He did a great film with the Safdie brothers called Good Times, Good Time rather, which is just one of those gut punch cinema moments. Just a really powerful film that I wasn't expecting. Cosmopolis, which isn't an awesome film, but he's really good in it. The David Cronenberg picture. Of course, The Lighthouse, which is probably one of my favorite horror movies of all time. I feel like that's a horror movie if you press me. He was in a really good science fiction film called High Life, which is about sort of colonizing of other planets and, you know, the travel there. And it was very weird and hyper-sexualized and, you know, kind of trippy. And it was just, he was amazing in it. Just really, really powerful performance. And I thought, okay, I'm on board, Robert. And he didn't not deliver. Like, it's an incredibly nuanced performance. He's in the cowl a lot. You've got to work pretty hard to emote through that. And the moment that got me was very, very early on, after the first fight sequence, and you've had the murder of the mayor, and he goes to investigate, and the cops are like, "Get the fuck out of here," you know, more or less. And Gordon's like, "Hey man, we need to go." And Bruce is struck by the fact that the young child is in the other room with some of the police officers. He found his father dead, and he looks this child in the eye. And Nirvana kicks in, and just the look in this man's face, the understanding of what that boy is dealing with in that moment, and the readiness that he has to continue the quest because of the little boy in him that died, which is that little boy, all through just, you know, eyes through a cowl. What power as a performer! What incredible weight he carries as such a young man. I can't wait to see what he does outside of Batman next, because the world's his oyster at this point. He's just played the most iconic superhero of all time. Sky's the limit. Matt Reeves directed the shit out of this. I've been a big fan of his. I really liked the Apes movies that he did. It is long. There's an argument that bits and pieces could be cut, or you can cut. Actually, the podcast that Steve Zodiac said, you could cut 20 minutes from it, but it's not all together. They're all over the place. And it's absolutely true. But it's pretty tight. There's not a lot of waste on it. Some real momentum. The film ratchets itself up all the way until the beginning of the third act, when everything goes to shit. Gotham is flooded. You are on a constant incline to get to that point. There's very few dips. And to maintain that level of tension through story and through cinematic technique and through score and sound design and things like that, to keep that consistent, like all of those parts working in the same direction, is really, really difficult. And it has to have a great shepherd. And he really is. I think it's going to be hard to top this one, Maddie, like I fucking know him. Just really quickly on story as well. I won't get into it too much because it's, you know, it's a brand new movie and everything. And if you've seen it, you know what I'm talking about anyway. But the 2 points that really got me, that made me feel like, okay, this is a really interesting turn. One is Riddler is captured and imprisoned by the beginning of the third act. The scariest part about this, and this film lives in the current world. There is a lot of TV screens. There's a lot of social media stuff going on. That's how Riddler communicates with people. He's doing it through social media. Through that medium, which we all know can be extremely toxic. I know you're on it right now, but you know that it is. He is able to manipulate a lot of things. Not only Batman himself, who gets terribly led astray, but also the media and the police. And the mobsters for that matter too. He's kind of playing everybody against each other. And then he himself is undone by, you know, misunderstanding his relationship with the Batman. But more to the point, the radicalization of Gotham City's citizens, a small group of them, to be the ones who do his dirty work for him, After the city is flooded, the seawall comes down, everybody's piled into the Gotham Stadium. And for the Riddler to have engineered a bunch of people who are dangerous to the point of being capable of doing great violence, to weaponize those people and to send them in to kill not only the mayor but bystanders is horrifyingly modern. I physically felt my body drop temperature when that happened. When I started seeing those, other people dressed like the Riddler coming out onto that catwalk thing, above the scoreboard with weapons, with rifles, it shook me, I've got to admit. Incredible storytelling device, very, very real. I'm impressed that they stuck by it, to say there is an enemy here and it's not some guy in a fucking cap with a question mark on it and spinning a cane. There are dangerous people out there, and the medium of social media is a way that they can be drawn together and then set loose upon a very, very unsuspecting public, despite the fact of everything we've seen. And finally, at the end of the third act of this film, the epilogue is Batman's last diary entry and Gotham's underwater. He lost. There is no victory here. And yet, through that, he's able to find greater purpose, saying that he needs to be better. His scars need to heal and make him stronger, not make him harder. So instead of closing off to people, and you see it with the young girl holds onto him as she's trying to, she's about to be airlifted out and she's scared, and he is safety for her at that moment. Beautiful. And this is where you will get, if we do get a sequel, and there probably is a guarantee that we will actually, but I'm just saying, you don't need to. This could be standalone, absolutely. But if it isn't, to see how he takes that newfound knowledge of what he can be to people that isn't a terrifying threat in the shadows all the time, beating on bad guys, but you don't know if he's really on your side either. For him to be an actual hero and for people to believe in him the way that they do in some of the Nolan pictures, the Batman becomes legend. And I think the final shot is what sold me, which is weird because that doesn't usually happen. It doesn't really echo anything earlier in the film like you would want satisfyingly for the arc to be complete in that fashion in terms of his visual cues. Selina and Batman are leaving the cemetery, so they come to the T intersection and Selina goes one way, Batman goes the other, and that's it. He drives off, looks in the rearview mirror, sees her taillights go over the hill. He turns back, looks forward, hits the gas, the score rises, and it's like, yep, it's the mission now. It's all about the mission. I like that. I like that it's like, this is just the beginning. Where he becomes the Batman we all know. Where he's not getting trounced in fights because he doesn't give a shit. He's just throwing anything which way. He's real scrappy, fighting any way he can. There's no precision work there. The foreplanning isn't there. He's just reacting, which is not what Batman does. Batman's the kind of guy who goes in and has everything planned out 7 ways from Sunday, and he's already calculated every possible outcome to this battle or whatever the situation might be most of the time. He doesn't react on impulse a lot, and if he does, it's calculated through all of these the efforts that he's gone through to get to that point. At this point, he's just a guy out there beating motherfuckers up, and I like that the mission statement, without saying it, is him looking forward and hitting that gas and going, I'm going back to Gotham and I'm going to make a difference. Beautiful. And my final little point about it is most articles or, clickbait kind of things or, even reviewers online immediately start ranking things. And I said it before, I'm guilty of it too. It's favourite signifying. The biggest question that keeps coming up is this better than The Dark Knight? Now, in my Batman Returns episode, I even said that. I said Batman Returns is my favourite Batman movie and I think it's better than The Dark Knight. I think it's better than The Dark Knight. That doesn't necessarily mean that it is, because it isn't. There is no gauge for that, really. You can break it down to cinematic technique, you can break it down to storytelling, all the little tiny parts of what it is to make a film a whole that you can start picking apart to say one thing is better than another. But really all it is it comes down to opinion and your preference, your choice. Is the Batman better than The Dark Knight? It doesn't matter. They're all different. It's like saying, do you like cars or cars? They're the same thing. They're all Batman stories. They're just told on different levels. And You can like one better than the other because that is your personal taste. If you like the 1960s, 70s Batman movie with Adam West and Burt Ward, you're not going to think that this most recent The Batman film is the best one. Of course you're not. Does that mean that you're wrong? Or does that mean the person that thinks that their one is right, that you're wrong? And like, it's maddening. They are completely different things. Look at the comic books, for instance. Do you like a certain Batman comic book better than others? Yeah, absolutely. Let's look at the biggest Batman works there are, okay? Let's say Year One, Frank Miller. Dark Knight Returns, Frank Miller again. He's all over it. Arkham Asylum, the Grant Morrison book. And Hush. Oh, and Long Halloween. Okay, so there's five different stories, different creators, different periods of time, different Batmans. Out of all of those, I probably like Year One the best. Personally, I think that is the story that speaks to me more. Does that mean the other ones aren't as good? No, it doesn't. It absolutely doesn't. It just means that my personal taste leans towards Year One. Do you understand what I'm saying? The movies are exactly the same. It's incredibly fashionable to take stance on these things. And it's super frustrating, for me, because that's not how I like to view movies. I can tell you my favorite movie is Jaws because that's my favorite movie. I think it's the best movie ever made. Is it? Probably not. But that's how I feel. If you want to be a critic, professional or otherwise, just on Instagram or something, I follow dozens and dozens and dozens of great critics on social media. Supremely talented writers, and I'm fascinated by their thoughts and how they think and how they break things down. And that's great. Go ahead and do it. I don't feel the need to do that. I just want to bolster things up and, be happy that I get to see another Batman movie. It's an absolute privilege to be here on planet Earth and be watching, the 10th Batman film of all time, or whatever the fuck it is. But you know what I'm trying to say. And I don't want to denigrate the people who do that either as a professional or just really like doing it, being a proper critic. But you also need to understand the line between you're a critic and you are either jumping on what is fashionable to do, which is to rank things like this because you feel you have to, or being critical in a way that is mean-spirited. So talking about something in a way that makes it sound like you could have done a better fucking job. It's that that I have a problem with. And also the thing that people do, and it's all through pop culture, Star Wars suffers from it quite a bit, is that people believe that they have the right to critique these things. Armchair quarterbacks is kind of what it's called. Critique these things because they have some sort of ownership over it, which is absolute garbage. Like these properties don't belong to you. They are loaned to you for the price of a ticket, and you get what you're given. So unless you want to go and make a change, you need to shut the fuck up and just either don't watch it or watch it, agree that you don't like it, and then move on. Don't go and shout at people on the internet about it unless you have something constructive to say, which a lot of critics do. A lot of critics do have a lot of good points. I'm sure there's flaws all up and down these things, and I could probably tell you what some of them are, but I don't care to look. So my biggest point is this the best Batman film ever made? Yes and no. You know what I'm saying? It absolutely is to someone. My cousin Lindsay fucking adores this film. We're chatting about it earlier today, and she's like, I haven't felt this way about a film since Pan's Labyrinth. Pan's Labyrinth came out like 15 years ago. Imagine being moved after that period of time by a movie. This is always going to be her favourite Batman now, no matter what happens. And I fucking love that. Another friend of mine, a buddy who's also a critic as well, a proper film critic, beautiful writer, he was nonplussed by it. So as far as favourite signifying or serial ranking, as I've been calling it over the last week or so since the Batman film came out, as far as all that goes, you can keep it. I'm just here to say I really like this movie. I think there's a lot about it that's great. I think people will really enjoy it. And what more could you ask from cinema, to be enjoyed and discussed and either set aside or not set aside. But as long as it's all love and we're all here for the same reason, then how bad could it be? So thanks very much for watching. We'll see you again on the Silly Stitch Up for something else. Beautiful. Maybe another Batman. You never know. There's one coming every other week at this point. Thanks very much. See you again. Peace. The Batmans.